So by using this 30-30 rule, we're trying to keep the paperwork to a minimum and send a lot of people home upright from this interesting place. All right, so that's another example of where our sun is making life miserable for us, because when a tree is struck by lightning, then a contest occurs. If the tree happens to have enough water in its tissues, it'll put out the fire. Now the heat usually ends up being generated right here in the roots, because as we know, lightning doesn't go up or down, it goes both up and down. And so as electricity is traveling through this tree, it builds up a huge amount of heat here in the roots, and that's normally where the fire will start. But if the tree has enough water, it will release the water from above down to the roots and it'll put the fire out. However, this contest can take a long time to get resolved. Sometimes it'll be a couple of weeks since we've had a thunderstorm before suddenly the tree catches fire. And if the tree is then burning and there's enough dead material on the surrounding ground, maybe some trees falling over, then you can get the chain reaction as fire moves from tree to tree to create a forest fire. Now, if I was standing here 50 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago, I would spend the remainder of the presentation, a good 30 minutes, telling you all how evil fire is and how eager you should be to give us every one of your tax dollars so we can fight every single fire under any circumstances whatsoever. But we've done a lot of good science in the last 30 years, and what we discovered is fire, like our star, is both a blessing and a curse. In fact, actually, it's more often, unlike most ecological disasters, fire more often is a benefit. Now, it's not to say that there aren't some animals that do suffer with fire. For example, woodpeckers, there are sapsuckers, birds that are going to be eating the beetles that would live in dead trees. Well, the dead trees are going to be the first ones to burn. That burns the beetles, and it makes it harder for these birds to find some food. So they don't really benefit from fire. Also, if you're a trout, in particular maybe a rainbow trout, then fire is not going to be your friend because it will cause a little increased soil erosion, get some ash into the water, and trout require really crystal clear water to survive. But for the rest of the forest residents, fire is a good thing. Those animals that browse, which is to say they eat the bark and the stems on young trees, they always benefit after a fire, because after a fire you get a lot of thick, dense, younger growth, plenty of food for porcupine and deer. Animals that are grazers, this means, of course, eating grass, they also benefit because one of the things a fire does, it will burn out the upper canopy of the forest, so now sunlight can reach the forest floor. And instead of having just a bunch of dead pine needles, now you can get all kinds of grasses to grow, which will feed a variety of animals like those. And then songbirds. Songbirds require a certain mid-level forest canopy to do their nesting in. Medium-sized trees, tall shrubs, and bushes. And again, with more sunlight in the forest system, that allows these smaller type species to grow up, creating good nesting habitat for these kinds of birds. Also, those shrub and berry bushes, well, they're going to produce berries and nuts, and that's going to feed a wide variety of animals. And when you have the populations of all these different kinds of animals increasing, then the populations of those higher up on the pyramid, the predators, is also going to grow. So instead of talking about fire with silly words like bad or evil, we now take a much more scientific approach to it and say that fire is an ecological process that causes devastation and brings about rebirth. In fact, my favorite little analogy is to refer to forest fires as the phoenix effect. Like the ancient phoenix in Egyptian mythology, a beautiful bird that ages, becomes weaker, and just as it dies, it bursts into flames. But from the new ashes arises a new, more vibrant, healthier bird. Same situation occurs with forest fire. Here's kind of a fun animal that has a fun little sun connection. This is the Utah prairie dog. They're all in hibernation now, which actually makes them a unique species. In fact, it's part of the reason why this particular species of prairie dog, being on the endangered species list, is considered something we must protect. Because unlike most prairie dogs, what they do is they hibernate truly. Instead of taking a bunch of grass and cutting it, bringing it down in their burrows and making a very big hay barn underground, as most prairie dogs do, these guys store all the food they're going to need to make it through like an 8-month-long Bryce Canyon winter by storing it on their body as fat. So this is what the prairie dogs look like in July. Here's what they look like in August. And by the time September, October rolls around, they're rolling around themselves. Great big blobs of fat. And when you're a great big blob of fat, well, the rest of the ecosystem would love to devour you. All these different animals that are also trying to get ready to survive an 8-month-long Bryce Canyon winter. Now, the prairie dogs are not endangered because of these natural predators. They're endangered because of us, human beings, that have decided that prairie dog habitat might be a better place to raise cattle, might be a better place to convert farmland, and they've lost habitat except in a few little national parks here in Utah. As far as surviving their natural predators, they're very good at it because they have a very sophisticated communication system and they take risks for one another. One will sacrifice or at least risk itself for the good of the colony, the good of the population. So in this case, they have a sentry prairie dog. His job is to look for all these predators. And let's say this prairie dog's name is Ed. Okay? I don't know why, I just like Ed. Seems like a good prairie dog name. So here's Ed. Now I'm Ed. And I'm standing up on my hind legs, lifting my big old August gut up in the air, and I'm looking around for anybody that might try to come and eat all my buddies. And of course, my buddies, they're down there just filling their faces, eating as fast as they can, bat themselves up. But I got to stand and keep an eye out for trouble. And when you're only about 14 inches tall, the horizons aren't very far away, right? So you got to be alert. So if some coyote comes ripping into the prairie dog town at 45 miles an hour, you can give your buddies a chance to get to safety. So Ed's job is if he does see an intruding predator, let's say it's a coyote charging in, then he turns, faces the coyote, and begins to bark. Drawing attention to himself, coyote keys in on him. Now the rest of his buddies, the moment they hear Ed bark, they don't have to stand up on their hind legs and look around trying to figure out, wonder where it's coming from. All they have to do is look at Ed. They see that Ed's pointing that way, and they go this way as fast as they can. Now, on top of that, what's really neat is the Ed, the prairie dog, and prairie dogs in general, have a at least three-part communication as to what kind of predator is threatening the town. In the case of a coyote, they will give a specific bark that says, this guy is really fast, okay? Get to the closest burrow, doesn't matter if it's yours, just get to a burrow and stay there as long as you can. In the case of a badger, the bark is, okay, well, he's not real fast, but he's going to chase you down your burrow. So get into your burrow and then go out the other side and keep running so that the badger won't get you. Same advice for weasel and rattlesnake. But the third one is from attack from above. Because hawks and eagles also love prairie dogs. So they also give a specific bark that says attack from above, get to a hole, whoever's it is, as quickly as you can. Now that presents a challenge though. Put yourself in Ed's toes, I guess. Put yourself in Ed's toes. How do you keep an eye on the sky at the same time you're watching the horizons? Because if you look up like this, is there an eagle? The coyote gets you. You're looking at the coyote, the eagle gets you, right? I don't know, not many honorary prairie dogs in the audience tonight. Shadows, there's somebody saw it. Is it written up there? Oh, yeah, right there. Okay. Yeah, right, the shadows. They can watch the sky because they know about shadows. This is why you will never see a prairie dog on a cloudy day. You ever wondered about that? It's not because they like to come up and sunbathe, okay? If you do see a prairie dog on a cloudy day, that particular prairie dog is not the ancestor of the next generation of prairie dogs. It's eagle food, okay? So here we go. Here's a golden eagle dropping out of the sky. Watch the shadow. Ed ducks. Eagle passes over. Ed turns around. Everybody goes, oh, okay, eagle going that way. No big deal. But eagles aren't stupid. They know not to attack from the sun. So most of the time, an eagle will come in at a different angle. So here's Ed looking around. Here comes the eagle from the other side. Shadow way behind it. Yep, and Ed gets invited back to the nest for dinner, right? It's okay you lose an Ed every once in a while because the rest of the colony's saved, and then tomorrow they put out a new sentry, number 2. The other thing we've observed with eagles here at Bryce Canyon, really spectacular, but we've got one mated pair that are so smart that they hunt together. And so, in this case, Dad Eagle drops out of the sky first, from the sun, shadow, Ed ducks, turns, never even sees Mom on the same flight line, just a half second behind, and he still ends up back at the nest for dinner. Yeah, paying attention to shadows, a matter of life and death. Now, humans also run into problems in this part of the world of the sun. Going back to those thunderstorms, a lot of our roads across the more remote sections of the desert are completely impassable when wet. No, not even in your central tire inflation Hummer can you make it through. You would need a bulldozer or some other tracked vehicle. And we try to explain this to people, but you spend $100,000 on a Hummer, you want to use it from time to time, so not everybody heeds our warnings. And you'll find yourself out on one of these wet roads, maybe, or a thunderstorm comes after you started down. What will happen to this clay? It's so sticky, it'll ball up on your tires to the point that your tires will then rip out your wheel wells. And you'll be really, really stuck at that point. But you don't have to die, even then. The good news is, if you know how to survive in the desert, and one of the key things is a solar-powered, water-purifying pit, then you're going to be okay. So here's how you do it. You dig a hole in the ground. You find some sort of container that will hold water. You put it just right there, kind of in the center of the hole. And then you go out in the desert looking for substances that contain water. And of course, you'd probably think, cactus is a great source of water. Yes, if you treat it correctly. Okay, you can't trust the old movies, like the John Wayne movies and stuff, where John Wayne's riding across the desert and he's all thirsty, and pretty soon his horse falls over dead. So he unbuckles the saddle and he puts it on his shoulder and he continues on. The sweat's just pouring off his face, which means he's only been outside for like 15 minutes. He's still got enough water he can sweat. It's like, John, I need you to come out of your air-conditioned trailer and do this shot, And so, carefully prepared shot, he comes over and there's a cactus, And he goes over the cactus and he tears off a hunk of it. He eats it because he's a man. And then he feels better. All of a sudden, he wanders into town, buys himself a new horse, and then continues on his adventures. No, don't eat cactus. 99.99% of cactus are very, very poisonous. The only time you ever want to eat cactus is if you decided that it's beyond hope and you want to put yourself out of your misery as soon as possible. Because cactus contain a very nasty kind of salt called alkali. And what this will do will cause you to make really bad decisions, have crazy hallucinations, and if you continue to eat cactus in a few hours, you'll just plain die. But you can get fresh water out of a cactus by using the solar-powered water purifying pit. They teach this in special courses, training, and some of the scouts, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts learn this in this part of the world. The other thing any Girl Scout can tell you is that deer poop is a fantastic source of water. So if you happen to find any of that, just gather it up, as much as you can get. Roadkill. Why not a skunk? Grab yourself a nice dead skunk that's been in the sun for a week or two, and chop these things up. If you want to do it right, you chop them up into pieces, and then you put them down here in the pit, and now you cover your pit, as I'm required to say, perhaps with a NASA space blanket, $12.95 at gift shops across the country. Or a tarp would be fine too, okay? Especially if it's reflective. But what you want to do is stretch the tarp over the top of the pit here and get some big rocks to kind of hold down the corners. And to do it right, you want to pile up dirt all the way around the edge here because you want to make this airtight inside your pit. One more big stone you push out into the center there so it kind of drags down and it creates a drip tip. And now during the heat of the day, all of that heat builds up inside the pit and it desiccates, sucks the water out of all these nasty things. And what goes up into the air is not the sulfur compounds, not the poisons, but just the H and the 2 and the O. And then later at night, once it cools off, all that condenses, it forms drops on the underside of the tarp. These drops make their way to the drip tip, they land in your container, and the next morning you got some more water to survive another day in the desert. And you can keep doing this until the park rangers show up and say, see, I told you you shouldn't have gone down that road.